Turning wet wood successfully requires a whole different set of skills and processing to make sure that when the bowl is dry, it's going to turn out the way you hoped it would. The Nor-Cal wood gathering crew is very pleased to present an expert in that field, Norm Hinman, to kind of lead us through all these steps. So without further ado, here's Norm.
Today we're going to rough out a bowl of green wood and prepare it for drying so that then in a year or two or three we can bring it back, return it down to the correct thinness and finish it at that point. Here's a blank that was cut from a green tree just a couple weeks ago, and I drilled a hole in here, and we have a screw center, and I will twist this in, that threaded screw.
And Norm, about how big is that blank?
It's 15 inches in diameter and approximately 4.5 to 5 inches thick. And that will make a nice salad bowl.
And that is, did you say walnut?
This is of black walnut. This came from, I believe, over near, well, between Davis and Winters, not too far from Pewter Creek. Get this in there snug so it won't come off while turning anyway.
Norm, that looks like a homemade screw chuck. Can you explain what you did there?
It is. I took a large screw that came with a 4-jaw chuck and cut a plate of 3/8 inch steel out of steel plate, drilled a hole in it, and then cut a ring to go on it so that the bowl would always fit snugly to it. And now we're going to see if we can get the threads lined up here. And there it goes. Okay, we set the what is called the banjo. I've played a guitar a lot of years, and I've played in some groups that had banjo players in it, and I have yet to see one of those banjos that looked anything like this. And when you start a piece out, it's a good idea to stand to one side. Don't stand straight out, because if it were to come apart, you don't want to be in the firing line.
Does rough turning a blank just shorten the time to cure by reducing the volume of wood, or does it also lower the risk of cracking or have other benefits?
Both. You're removing a lot of the wet wood, a lot of the water, and the wood that is inside of that rough turned bowl is much closer to a surface than it would have been if it had been just a solid blank. And the chances of it cracking, especially if you've coated it with a greenwood sealer, is much less than it would be from a full blank.
one thing I noticed, and maybe you can mention this to your people too, is it looks like you can see how wet it is. Right?
Yes,
Pretty fresh.
yes.
Well, did you say when this was cut?
It was a couple weeks ago. And this is also springtime, and the trees are full of water at this time of the year.
Good point. So it does make a difference what time of year you cut the blank.
Absolutely. This piece of wood was cut in the late spring down here in the valley, and trees are growing in the springtime. They're making leaves. They're starting to make fruit. Even though walnuts aren't really making this time of year, the nuts themselves, but the trees are expanding. They're soaking up water. So a piece of wood cut this time of year and then dried will shrink a lot more than the same piece of wood if it was cut in October, November. This will shrink a lot more than wood, because that wood is already shrunk down even though it's standing.
Are there certain blanks that you decide are not proper for rough turning? They're better off to leave as a solid blank to dry?
I would be reluctant to try to think of any that would be safer as a blank, with the exception of the sycamore, the quarter sawn wood has a nice grain to it. Flat sawn is very bland. But if you rough out that sycamore blank that came from a half of the log between the bark and the pith, it's going to shrink irregularly, and you're going to have a difficult time returning it into a round bowl.
So just the one species
That's the only one that I know of.
Huh, interesting.
There may be many others. Now, one of the things I liked about this piece is it's got good diameter size and reasonable depth that goes with it. It'll make a very nice salad bowl with a little bit of depth and not real deep. And I'll make the bottom about a third of the diameter of the bowl itself. The shape is starting to come through, but we're not through yet because we still have some bark on the two sides. But I'm going to make a recess in here and leave a ring here that will eventually, after the piece is dry, will become the base that the bowl will sit on. I use my calipers.
I hear you have a pretty slick system for tracking wood from the time you harvest it right through to all the bowls produced from it. Would you walk us through that?
It's a notebook, and when I get a piece of wood, a piece of log, a tree, an orchard, that unit gets the next sequential number in the book. And with that number, I record the date that I got it, where I got it from, maybe who I got it from, and then that stays with that number. All the pieces get that number. And so I can look at a piece of wood and see how long I've had it, where I got it from, the kind of wood it is. And when I rough out a bowl, I put that number on it and put the month and the year that I roughed it out. So that gives me a feel for whether it's ready to be finished or not.
Oh, what number are you up to in your book?
About 640.
And you have any idea how many bowls you've turned in your life?
Probably in excess between 5,500 and 6,000.
That's a lot of bowls.
Yeah. I want to make the inside a little bit flat here, so it's out of the way from the jaws of the chuck. And I want the inside to be at about 4.5 inches. Four and a quarter, well, just a little bit more.
Norm, how deep,
Yes,
how deep is this recess, do you think?
about a quarter of an inch,
Okay.
roughly. There's no set amount, but if the bowl is not going to be real heavy while you're working on it, it could be shallower. If it's a real heavy bowl, it better be a little bit deeper and a little wider here for strength, because you're expanding the chuck and you can tear that out. If you're using a gripping chuck, then you're not likely to break the wood that's in the middle. Now I want to make sure that that is like a dovetail, sort of a reverse dovetail, so that the chuck will grip inside of it.
When you do everything right, do you still expect some rough-turned blanks to crack?
Yes, many of them will. Not that you necessarily did anything wrong, but the tree was bound and determined that it was going to crack. I stand out here so I can look across and see the shape that I'm getting. Now it's true this bowl is going to be turned again once it gets dry, and you can adjust the shape a tiny bit at that point. But if you've taken away wood that you would need at that point, nothing you can do about it. It's gone. Still feel something there, and I think it's still some bark. Yep. Well,
Now, could you explain if you left that bark inclusion, what would happen to the wood as it dried?
if I left this bark here, in 2 or 3 weeks, it's going to dry and be gone. And this side over here, here's the end grain, side grain, end side. The sides are going to pull in like this, and the thing will become oval. So the length is still going to be about the same size as it is right now, but the sides are going to be pulled in. You have to leave it thick enough so that you have a circle going all the way around the top. Well, this is sunk in right now. Once it dries, this will be still sunk in. So you may not be able to turn a clean circle and not have a hole in it. I'm simply going to make a steeper side. This is wood that it has cut off, and it's at the end. Now, this is the part that will still be sticking out the farthest. The fact that this is missing won't hurt anything because the sides will be pulled in, and you're going to take a lot of wood off the ends anyway. And so this will never be missed. I am simply going to make a little steeper shape on this and get rid of that bark right there. I think we're going to make it, because I think that bark is mostly gone, if not all gone at this point. I'll simply tighten this curve up here and make a nicely shaped bowl. I don't see any bark, so I think we have accomplished. I need to take a little bit more off up here because we've got a little depression right here. I think I picked up the one I had quote discarded before. Yeah. Make a finish off the nice tight little curve right there. That's the part that we're looking at. We're not looking at the rest of this up here because that's going to go on the floor pretty soon.
Anything special that you have to think about as you're doing that, Chuck?
Yeah, to make sure that the jars are pulled in far enough so this ring will go over it. I hadn't done that. Now, remember to go in the opposite way and expand them. With this kind of chuck, with a separate bevel gear, and the ring gear is there, they're in contact. The ring gear is lagging behind the bevel gear. This is the driver. Now, this bevel gear over here is lagging behind the ring gear. So there might be a little slack in there, so you want to make sure you take it up. And don't turn the wrong way like I just did. There. We're going to drill out a little center hole here. And the center is always difficult to get turned out. And so we'll just drill a hole through the center. And we'll go to a point short of where we'll want to turn the inside to. Now, if we look here, this curve is going around and it's being interrupted by this ring that is forming the ring that the chuck is holding on to. And inside of there, the wood is at about the same level as this curve is going to. So we have to keep that in mind as we are hollowing. We don't want to just think about this wood here. We want to ignore that it's there and think that this outside edge is just going all the way around right to the center. So what we'll do here is we will mark a point at which we want this hole to stop. And it'll be right about there. If I can keep my thumb on that. One more. And that's enough. It's always better to be a little short than a little too long.
Are you a fan of drying?
Not here in this valley. Greenwood sealer sort of takes its place. I've known several people in Oregon that swear by their kiln, but they live on the coast It's foggy much of the year. They would wait 10, 15 years before they could finish their bowls. So,
So it's
yeah.
just that around here it's hot and
Right.
dry enough to,
Yeah, and in the
dry it naturally.
in the east, the central states, and in the east, especially in the southeast, kiln might be about the only way you can really get your wood dry.
I've seen online that people with kilns, they talk about needing to keep the humidity up
That is
inside
correct.
the kiln.
That is correct.
And here it's very dry heat, so are
Right.
you not concerned about it being both hot and drying the wood too rapidly, or that's covered by the...
That's why you put the greenwood sealer on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you're using a kiln, you wouldn't use the greenwood sealer then?
Well, no, the kiln would take the place of the greenwood sealer.
Interesting. All right. That's something I hadn't picked up on in the people talking about kilns, that if you're going the kiln route, then you don't seal the end grain.
You don't need to seal it, because in the kiln you're keeping a moisture barrier is within the box, and you gradually reduce the dew point, and that takes care of the drying then. When I'm doing this turning, I don't like having one hand behind my back. It can't see what you're trying to do. So you bring it up here. Now you don't have as much leverage with it, but once you need some more leverage, bring it against your body, and everybody's got an elbow. It'll give you a lot of added support quite effectively. Okay, I've run into a situation here where the tool is not long enough to effectively reach in there at a good angle. So I have another tool that will work. Some people refer to it as a bottom feeder. And the only thing different about it is back about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I took a bowl gouge and ground the end off of it. So instead of having a bevel like that, it has a bevel like this. Now I can stick it in there, and I keep the bevel on, and the depth of the bowl doesn't affect it nearly as strongly. Now it won't cut rapidly because of the angle of the cutting edge, but it's easy to control.
How do you determine a blank's moisture content?
I have never really worried too much about a blank's moisture content. I have no meters. I've never used a meter. I offhand don't really see any necessity for it. If the wood is reasonably green and I can't get at it immediately, I will cover it, wrap it, whatever, in plastic sheeting, big plastic bags. Introduce some moisture with a hose or a bucket of water or a sprayer, something to make sure that there's plenty of moisture there and that it will tend to stay till I can get at it. Then I will rough it out, I'll coat it with greenwood sealer, and then let the sealer protect it while it's drying. I think I may have to sharpen a tool before I finish it. Honing it, yes. With stainless steel polish. And that takes off that little burr and leaves a very sharp edge. And notice that wheel is going away from you because it's a wood wheel. It's actually MDF. And if it came toward you, you just cut your wheel off. Sometimes you can use a pull cut to get some of that out, as long as you don't get around the curve too much. If you get around the curve too much, the thing will feed itself. We've reached the bottom of the hole, so we don't want to go any deeper until we make some measurements. This is what I call a macrometer as opposed to a micrometer, measuring bigger things. A piece of plywood that I cut out on a bandsaw and glued a dowel to that had a hole drilled in it, and put a couple of little feet on it and stuck a stick in it, and I used 1/24 of a 1-foot ruler, so I can make a bunch more of them. And that is how I measure the thickness of something I'm turning. Okay, that's still at about an inch. Still about an inch there, and a little more over here. That's inch and 5/8. So we've got quite a bit to go there yet. Maybe one more cut around here, and then take some more out of that middle, and we're there.
What depth are you searching for?
I'm looking for about an inch at the rim, and then probably 5/8 down around where the where the foot will be.
And will that depth or size change depending on the size of the bowl?
Oh yes,
Or
yes.
you're doing
The
because you put
the
a-
actual numbers will change. The ratios won't. At the rim, you have an appropriate thickness that will allow you, after it is dried, to have a circle all the way around. I'm going to grab a bowl that has already shrunk. It's dried. Now you can see it's fairly thick, but if you were to make various measurements around, you will find that the outside of this, on the sides, where the grain is running this way, is not much bigger than the inside at the ends. So that you still do have, your circle will run like this, and it'll run to the outside over here, and then back to the middle here, and then over to the outside again. That's a round circle. If you don't have that round circle, you won't have a bowl.
So you would normally start on a bowl. What is that now? About 14. This one is about 13 inches or something. 14 inches.
That's pretty close to the 15.
So you'd make an inch to start on the outside,
Yeah,
and 5/8
yeah.
on the inside.
Something.
But
pretty
if the
close to
bowl
that.
was half that size, would you make it a half inch, or would you make it 3/4?
Probably 5/8.
5/8 at
And
at
then-
that top, and then down to a half inch or
3/8. Yeah, yeah.
How does shrinking happen? How does shrinking impact the shape of a turned item?
Well, the phloem tubes, the cells of the wood, are linear up and down in the tree. They are the moisture carriers, and in the springtime they will be quite full of water. In the fall they have already shrunk down because the tree isn't growing at that point. It's not producing fruit. And so as the cells lose water, they collapse upon themselves, just like pulling your fingers together.
Let's see. And yeah, Norm, oh, you got your video on, good. So let me get to where I can see Norm. There we go. Oh, there you go, Norm. Back up a little bit. I'm seeing your forehead.
I was just trying to read what I needed to read.
Yeah, I know. I was teasing Norm before because his glasses are bad, so he has to get really close to the screen. So I was telling him, make sure you back up enough so we're not looking at your nose the whole time. So, so we had some questions that came into the chat. I'd like to start with those, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the audience. And just 1 second, let me scroll to the beginning of these questions. We had quite a few, and some of them. Okay. So there was a question about why you go to all the trouble of turning between, trouble of making that tenon instead of turning between centers. And it really kind of boiled down to, since the comment was, since the tenon is going to warp, wouldn't you make the wet diameter greater than 1/3 so you can reduce it to 1/3 once it's dry? So they're sort of related about how the tenon let's start with the first thing. Turning between centers. Why didn't you bring the tailstock up and hold it between centers?
I'm not sure at what point that question is.
It was right at the beginning when you had the screw chuck on and you were rough shaping the outside. And I think some people have told me, even though you may not need it, to bring the tailstock up just for a safety thing. And then maybe when you get to the point where you're having to get inside that tenon, then maybe pull the tailstock away. But for you, you kept the tailstock away through the whole thing. Are you just confident in your screw chuck?
Yes, in several thousand bowls, I have never had one come off.
Okay, that's
Uh,
good odds.
I always make sure that I use a probably stronger screw chuck than I might really need.
Mhm.
I have several sizes.
Yeah, someone asked to see your faceplate up close. Unfortunately, we can't do that because it's out in your shop, I know, but I think you described it at one point. Could you, Doris, just sort of describe it again?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that.
That screw chuck faceplate that you use, could you
Yes.
describe it so they understand what you made?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, I cut a circular piece of 3/8 inch steel, and then cut a ring, which is about the same size as it, that is about 3/4 of an inch, wide all the way around. Welded it to it, and then took a screw from a large chuck that comes with a large chuck, welded it into the center of that round piece, that circular piece, and then welded a bridge bolt, a bridge nut on the outside, so that the threads will match the threads on my chuck. And it's a fairly rigorous screw center.
Yeah, and I guess you just have to make sure your screw chuck and the bolt are dead center, that they're both lined up perfectly in the center. That would be the trick, I guess.
Well, often they're not.
But it doesn't act like an offset chuck.
Sometimes I have to turn quite a ways before the lathe will actually sit still. But I also have one lathe that is strongly screwed to the concrete floor, concrete slab. It's a VB36, and it will. I have the largest piece I've ever turned on it so far had a radius of 24 inches, and it was wildly off center.
Someone asked, do you core your wood?
If I what?
Do you ever core to get multiple blanks?
I have not. I have had no problem getting wood. Wood tends to find me. Being a member of the artery, a lot of phone calls will come and from people who tell me they've just had a tree taken down in their front yard or backyard, or some trees in an orchard or some such thing as that. And I will go, I will finish a bowl. I'll go and get the wood, leave them with a nice bowl. And that tends to pay both of us.
And
Let me go back and ask Norm a question on his faceplate.
oh, hold on a minute. Just about the faceplate? Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you just use a screw in your four-jaw chuck as rather than doing this welding up a faceplate? I mean, wouldn't that be the same?
Not really. By the time you put that screw in that chuck, you have much less thread sticking out beyond the jaws of the chuck.
Really?
Yes. Also, by the time that chuck will grab that screw, the face of that chuck will usually be fairly small.
Yeah, what I was thinking was you need a pretty wide jaws on your chuck.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have a couple of chucks that are quite a bit larger, and they would tend to accomplish that a little better.
Yeah.
But I've already got this made, so
Yeah, they made that.
I made it about 20 years ago. So
Yeah,
I didn't have the big chucks then.
yeah.
Okay.
So, Norm, this is just a comment. You were talking about the way you number your bowls and put them in your notebook, and kind of a joke said, "Don't lose that notebook." So
That's right. It's in a top drawer.
yeah, well, if there's a fire, grab that first. So one of the things though that I thought you might share with the people, and I know from your work in the artery that I've seen, and by the way, the artery is a co-op gallery in Davis where Norm, I don't know if you still do, but Norm used to sell his wood, his turnings.
Yes, I still belong.
Okay, so when I visited there before, Norm quite often has near his piece a description about where the wood came from that he made that piece from, and I think that is really valuable from artistic sales point of view. Can you comment on that?
Yes, actually, most of the ones that I have those descriptions on were pieces that came from around the Davis area.
So that the people know it's local and yeah, they can relate
Yes.
to it. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea if you're trying to sell your pieces. Let's see. Let me go through this a little more. Oh, your glasses. Cheryl said, I want to know about your glasses. Shifting vision can be an issue for me. You want to explain?
Okay, my glasses. Yeah.
Well,
When
first
I'm
of all,
turning,
Norm, let me interrupt because some people may not know that you have some vision problems. And
okay. What would that question be?
well, I'm just saying that you might let them know what your vision problems are and what you do to try and augment that with the glasses or the way you turn.
Norm, it looked like you had additional glasses perched on top of your head while you were turning that were close-ups or something. I was just curious about those. Are they magnifiers?
Absolutely, yes. I wear goggles when I'm turning, and so they are of no magnification. Then I have another pair that well, you probably saw it. It goes around my head, and it's hinged. I can pull it down, and it is like a 2 and a 3 magnification, quite strong and very helpful.
I'm very nearsighted, so I can see how that would be a great help.
Well, yeah, I have, maybe it sounds like I'm boasting here. I have macular degeneration. I have cataracts, and I have glaucoma. Now, a year ago, I had the left cataract removed, so that has helped. And the reason I only had one removed is I have a scar on the retina of my right eye, so I have no central vision in it, which gives me no depth perception. I'm fairly accustomed to that because I got a parasite in it in the bloodstream in April of 1949. So I'm fairly accustomed to that.
Yeah, I'm amazed at what you can do with that vision concerns, but you do it, you make it look seamless. I'm going to move to another question now, and it has to do with when you're turning the inside of the bowl. So you've made the outside, you've turned it around, and now you're taking out the inside of the bowl. And there's a place where you've removed a lot of the core, the inside of the bowl. And the question was, wouldn't it be possible to tilt the tool rest into the bowl rather than leave it straight across?
Well, what, as long as you're working along the side of the bowl, the curve, the upper part of the bowl, you could do that, because what you want is your gouge to be as close to right angles to the tool rest as possible. Now, once you get into the bottom of the bowl, now your tool handle has to be back toward the rim of the bowl. And if you angle that tool rest in, now your tool is going to be close to parallel to the tool rest. If you want to try that, be very careful. Your tool is very unstable.
Yeah, so you want to try and keep that 90 degrees.
That is right.
Okay. Another question has to do with when you were sharpening on your grinder, and I noticed that you all had your magnification glasses on. And can you tell me, what are you looking at, or what are you looking for when you're sharpening on the grinder?
Well, at the beginning, you may have noticed I looked across the grinder. In other words, with no depth perception, I don't know what part of the tool is really going to be first at the wheel. So I look across at the gap, lay the tool on the wheel, then pull the handle up ever so slightly so that the edge is starting to become against the wheel, but not too much. You don't want several different bevels on there. And I will take several small cuts, and eventually I can see the edge starting to disappear just a tiny bit. And that's as far as I go.
Oh, so you're actually seeing the grinder take away the edge of that metal, right?
That is right.
Okay. I think we have one more question in the chat, and then we'll open it up to people. Do you, excuse me, do you seal with white glue? What do you seal your bowls with?
The finished one, you mean?
No,
The greenwood sealer.
the greenwood sealer. Yeah. Do you use what product do you use?
Well, the product that I have used most of the year was Mobile Sur M. And the reason I have used that was because in about 1984, I made some calls to see if I could where I could buy some. Dale Nish told me about it. And so I found a place in San Jose that carried it. It was $9 a gallon and only available in 55-gallon drums. So I thanked the person and hung up. That was in the spring. That fall, we had our 25th anniversary, and my wife told me that, well, to follow her, and she would take me to my gift. I had already given her mine. We went outside, went along the sidewalk. This was in September, and now it's about 9 o'clock. And she went next door, started up the driveway, and then went over and opened the neighbor's garage door. I was kind of flabbergasted, but there, with a red ribbon around it, was a 55-gallon drum of Mobile Sur.
How do you spell that, Norm?
MOBIL-CER. Actually, it's Mobile Sur M.
All
I
right.
don't know if I haven't seen any of it on the market for a long time.
Are you out of it now?
That drum is empty.
All right. We're gonna have to, what are you gonna switch to?
I've got some anchor seal.
Ah, okay. So we're going to open it up to the audience. What I'd like to do, if anyone has a question to Norm, and if you know how to raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button and clicking that raise hand button, that will be helpful to me, and we'll start with that. Okay, Shan, let's go to you since you were quick on the draw. We're gonna.
This is Shan. Do you prefer to do the expansion chuck when you finish it, or do you like the gripping method from the outside?
I have no particular preference. The bowl and what the purpose is, the shape of it, is what dictates to me which I would use. A table use piece will almost always get expansion, because then you can make a nice ring for the bowl to sit on, and usually a little bit larger. For a display bowl, the raised spigot is, I think, looks a little nicer on the finished piece.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to put their hand up? Not, okay, Ernie, let me bring you up here. Go ahead, Ernie. Oh, you're muted, Ernie.
Hello.
You need to unmute yourself. Unmute.
Got it.
Okay.
I'm a little slow here.
That's all right.
Norm, when you were talking, you mentioned that on an olive bowl, you hand sand only. Would that be considered hand sanding? Would a random orbital sander be considered hand sanding? And I presume it's because of the heat generated?
No,
Oh.
no, I use it. I have two angle drills, and I have a 3-inch and a 2-inch mandrel that will take cloth backed sandpaper discs. And for the outside, I use the right angle drill to hold it. On the inside, I have a 60-degree angle drill. Otherwise, the body gets in the way when you're trying to get into the bottom of a bowl. And so when I say hand sanding, I didn't mean to imply that I hold a sandpaper in my hand. It will be it'll be power sanding, but the lathe is not running.
Okay.
Because the olive bowls will be quite warped in various directions, and so you don't want it turning. You want to sand by moving the drill around.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, Brian Benson, hold on one second, Brian. Oops. 1 second. Huh. Oh, Brian, turn on your video and audio, Brian. Brian, are you gonna have, if you have a question, you turn on your audio and video? Okay, well, while we're waiting for him, is anybody else, if you want to put your hand up, anyone else? Otherwise.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you turn on your
I'm
video,
sorry.
or you don't, if you don't.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Have you turned a finished bowl out of green wood?
Well, yes. I do almost all of my olives that way, because they warp and crack so badly that I just go ahead and turn them down to 1/4 inch thickness, and then put them in a plastic bag, a whole bunch of them in a big plastic bag, and let them dry. Then I will put them on the lathe. I will catch them in a chuck, put them on the lathe just to hold them, and then I will power sand them as need be. Move it around wherever, and finish them in that fashion.
Okay,
I don't try to return them.
gotcha. That's why you were talking about the warps on the, yeah, why, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't see any other hands up. If someone else wants to ask Norm a question, what I ask you to do first, tell me your name so I can find you on the list. Oh,
I
Mike,
think-
you got your hand up. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey Norm, this is Mike Newland. How you doing?
Okay.
Were you a president of Nor-Cal for a while? And if so, what year?
In 92.
92.
Yes,
And were you also involved in AAW?
I still am. Yes, I joined AAW in 1988.
Wow.
But Norm,
I joined Nor-Cal in January of '89.
and were you on the board of AAW or?
Yes, I was on the board from '98 through '02.
And what was your position?
I was secretary the whole 5 years,
Wow. Well, thank you for that.
and
Yeah.
chaired several committees, which everybody does.
Thanks for the presentation, Norman, and your participation in the craft.
Yes, really.
Yeah,
A lot.
yeah, I managed to get the AAW symposium to UC Davis in '95.
Nice.
Wow. Wow. Well, maybe they'll bring it back here someday. That'd be convenient. But I understand it's a lot of work for the club that's the host club though.
Actually, it is.
Yeah.
It-
Okay,
it
we'll
is.
go back to Shan. He's got his hand up. Shan, you want to turn your video on for us? And your audio, actually. Oh, you're just clapping. Never mind. I see.
Yeah, I was just clapping for
That was
Norm.
yeah, very good.
Sorry.
Norm,
Thank you, Shan.
clapping for you quietly. Anyone else like to ask a question? Just tell me your name and turn your video on and audio. No more questions? Okay. All right, well, I'm not hearing any other questions. So Norm, on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank you. You've done a great job and I really appreciate you taking the time to first turn the bowl and then work with Don and Mark and I to create that video. I found it really interesting. And then again for tonight for answering our questions. So thank you so much, and my claps to you too.
Chris, I want to thank you for helping me be here.
No problem. That's what I do. Shan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll see if anybody has any show and tell.
Okay, yeah, Norm, spectacular video. And I would say you probably have a high percentage of bowls that do not crack because of the meticulous measuring. And so thank you for that. And you're a mentor and an inspiration to all of us here at the club.